The Galactic Coalition had existed for so long that most of its leaders no longer remembered a time when expansion was questioned. Borders were suggestions, treaties were pauses, and new species were evaluated the same way they always had been, by fleet size, weapon yield, and obedience. Civilizations that complied were absorbed. Those that resisted were erased. It was efficient, predictable, comfortable. Humanity disrupted that comfort without ever firing a shot. They appeared quietly, filing trade requests instead of military challenges, establishing colonies with unusual restraint. Their ships were few, oddly shaped, and lacked the aggressive symmetry common to war fleets. Coalition analysts initially marked them as a low-priority emerging species, technologically competent but strategically naive. No grand armadas. No territorial hunger. No visible ambition. Yet something about human vessels unsettled the long-serving observers who bothered to look closely. Their hulls were thick without being bulky. Their energy signatures were inconsistent, fluctuating in ways that suggested constant internal change. Weapon ports were minimal, sometimes absent entirely, as if combat were an afterthought. Even stranger, human ships rarely traveled in tight formations. They drifted with deliberate spacing, maintaining distances that defied standard tactical doctrine. Most dismissed these details as inefficiency. One voice did not. An old coalition tactician, a survivor of 3 extinction wars, reviewed the data longer than required. He noted how human ships reacted to stress tests, how simulated damage never produced cascading failures. He saw how internal systems appeared layered, redundant, stubbornly persistent. When asked for his assessment, he issued a warning so brief it was nearly ignored. "Human ships are special," he said. "Engage them only if you intend to learn why." The chamber laughed. The coalition had heard warnings before. Every species claimed uniqueness. Every defeated civilization insisted their methods were misunderstood. The tactician was thanked for his service and quietly sidelined. Humanity was scheduled for compliance encouragement, a limited operation meant to force diplomatic submission without significant expenditure. The decision was unanimous. A fleet was assembled, not a conquering force, just enough firepower to remind humans of their place. Orders were clean, efficient, and routine. Enter human-controlled space. Disable orbital infrastructure. Demonstrate superiority. Withdraw. No one considered failure. As the fleet advanced, human responses were delayed but calm. No mobilization spikes. No panic signals. A single message was transmitted on open channels, unencrypted and oddly polite. It did not threaten. It did not plead. It warned. The message stated that human vessels were not designed according to galactic norms. That they were built with assumptions others did not share. That escalation would produce results the coalition might regret. Commanders scoffed. Warnings without leverage were meaningless. If human ships were truly special, they would have shown it already. The fleet crossed the boundary. Sensors immediately began reporting anomalies. Target locks struggled to resolve stable profiles. Energy readings shifted unpredictably. Even so, firing solutions were calculated and weapons armed. The first volley was prepared, more ceremonial than necessary. Human ships did not break formation. They did not advance or retreat. They simply waited. At that moment, something subtle but deeply wrong became apparent. The human vessels were not broadcasting fear. They were not signaling defiance either. They behaved like systems already engaged in a process long underway, as if the arrival of the coalition fleet was an expected variable rather than a surprise. The tactician's warning resurfaced in several minds too late to matter. Human ships are special. No one in the coalition had asked what kind of species would build warships not to win quickly, but to survive indefinitely. No one had considered that a civilization born from constant conflict might design its machines to endure loss rather than avoid it. As the first weapons fired and human hulls absorbed impacts that should have shattered them, understanding began to spread, slowly, painfully. This was not a misunderstanding. This was the moment the galaxy realized it had mistaken restraint for weakness. The Coalition fleet advanced with textbook confidence. Formation grids locked, targeting arrays synchronized, command chatter filled with predictions of rapid compliance. Against any other species, this display alone would have ended resistance. Human space remained silent, punctuated only by the steady presence of their ships, scattered but deliberate, as if each vessel occupied a position chosen long before the encounter was planned. The first volley was calibrated for intimidation rather than destruction. Energy lances converged on the nearest human hull, striking with enough force to collapse shields, fracture armor, and trigger catastrophic decompression. Instead, the impact dispersed across the surface in muted flares. The ship recoiled, systems flickering, but it did not rupture. It did not tumble. Within seconds, its energy profile stabilized. Coalition commanders exchanged irritated remarks and ordered increased output. The second strike should have been fatal. Weapons overloaded into destructive thresholds forbidden by treaty, beams drilling into the same target from multiple vectors. Hull plating warped, peeled, then flowed back into alignment. Internal structures reconfigured in real time, isolating damaged sections without loss of propulsion or control. Sensors reported the impossible, structural integrity rising after sustained fire. Other human ships did not intervene. They did not return fire. They adjusted spacing, drifting subtly, as though responding to internal calculations invisible to Coalition systems. Missiles launched at secondary targets lost tracking, confused by fluctuating signatures that refused to remain fixed long enough to lock. Coalition doctrine relied on decisive annihilation. Confusion bred aggression. Orders escalated rapidly. Entire squadrons opened fire, saturating space with coordinated destruction. Human vessels absorbed it, shedding heat, venting energy, altering configurations in ways no standardized ship could replicate. What should have been debris fields became clouds of controlled damage. Reports flooded command channels. Weapon efficiency was dropping. Power systems overheated without obvious cause. Guidance algorithms returned contradictory data. It was as if the battlefield itself rejected Coalition assumptions. A breakthrough was declared when one human ship finally went dark, drifting without visible response. Cheers rippled through the fleet, brief and premature. Moments later, the vessel split, not from damage, but design. Sections separated cleanly, each igniting independent drives and rejoining the formation as smaller combat units. Silence replaced celebration. Analysts scrambled, recalculating losses, then froze. No confirmed kills. Not one. Every engagement labeled successful collapsed under review. Human ships were not dying. They were adapting, redistributing damage, converting impact into data. Only then did the Coalition recognize the pattern. Humanity was not trading ships for time. They were gathering information under fire, allowing the enemy to reveal everything. The first human weapon discharged without warning. It was precise, almost understated, striking a Coalition cruiser's power core through layered defenses previously considered impenetrable. The ship did not explode. It simply went inert, drifting, systems silent. Panic crept into command voices. Retreat was suggested, then dismissed. Pride demanded escalation. The fleet surged forward, convinced that overwhelming force would still prevail. Human ships shifted at last, closing distance with unsettling calm. The engagement had crossed an unseen threshold. What the Coalition mistook for restraint had been preparation. The warning had never been about survival. It had been about what followed. Deep within the fleet, fear finally replaced certainty. Command structures fractured as conflicting orders spread faster than they could be resolved. Veteran officers realized too late that every tactic revealed another weakness, every escalation another data point harvested by human systems. The battle was no longer symmetrical. It was asymmetrical by design. Humanity was not reacting to Coalition aggression. It was finishing a calculation already in progress, one built on patience, endurance, and an understanding that the first blows in any war were never meant to decide the outcome. By the time this truth settled, the initiative was gone, surrendered quietly in the space between one heartbeat and the next. There would be no return to control. Only consequences remained. And they were unavoidable. For everyone involved. Now. Understanding arrived too late to stop what followed. Coalition analysts finally stopped trying to force human behavior into familiar models and began observing it on its own terms. What they saw dismantled centuries of accepted doctrine. Human ships were not single weapons platforms. They were layered systems designed to continue functioning no matter how much of them was broken. Damage was not a failure state. It was an expected condition. Every hit altered internal priorities. Power rerouted, command authority redistributed, structural components reshaped themselves to support what remained rather than what was lost. Where coalition vessels depended on flawless coordination, human ships assumed fragmentation. Where alien fleets protected command cores, human vessels dissolved the idea of a core entirely. No single strike could cripple them because there was nothing central to destroy. Data streams revealed something worse. Each human ship operated as both combatant and analyst. Every incoming weapon taught it something. Frequency, yield, timing, thermal behavior, nothing was wasted. The longer the engagement continued, the less effective coalition fire became. Weapons were not being countered through shields alone but through prediction. Humanity was learning faster than the coalition could adapt. A chilling realization spread through the command structure. These ships had not been built to win battles quickly. They were built to endure wars that never went as planned. Humanity's history, once dismissed as primitive, suddenly made sense. They had evolved on a world where conflict was constant, resources limited, and survival favored those who could recover rather than dominate. Their machines reflected that truth with brutal honesty. Then the second layer revealed itself. Human ships began communicating among themselves without detectable signals. Coalition sensors picked up no transmissions, yet movements synchronized perfectly. Damage sustained by one vessel informed the defensive responses of the others. Entire formations adjusted based on a single impact, as if the fleet shared a collective memory. What the coalition had assumed were individual ships were, in practice, components of a distributed organism. When human weapons deployed again, they targeted systems the coalition had never prioritized protecting. Logistics nodes collapsed. Energy distribution failed. Command vessels lost coordination not through destruction, but silence. Human strikes were surgical, aimed not at killing crews, but at unraveling the machinery of control. Entire squadrons drifted intact yet helpless, unable to fight or flee. Fear finally overwhelmed arrogance. Coalition officers demanded to know when the humans would commit fully, when the real attack would begin. The answer was devastatingly simple. This had always been the real attack. Humanity did not escalate emotionally. It escalated methodically. Every phase flowed into the next with mechanical inevitability. Captured telemetry revealed the final truth. Human ships were built under a single guiding assumption, that they would be outnumbered, outgunned, and misunderstood. They were designed to fight enemies who refused to play fair, who ignored warnings, who believed superiority was proven through force alone. Every system reflected that expectation. The warning resurfaced again, no longer mocked, now whispered. Human ships were special not because they were indestructible, but because they refused to fail in ways the galaxy understood. They turned punishment into advantage, chaos into structure, and enemy confidence into liability. The coalition had expected resistance. It had encountered inevitability. By the time the fleet realized it was no longer shaping the battle, only feeding it, the outcome was sealed. Humanity was not demonstrating power. It was demonstrating philosophy. One forged through centuries of loss, adaptation, and survival against impossible odds. Against that mindset, numbers meant nothing. Tradition meant nothing. Only endurance mattered. And endurance, it became clear, was humanity's true weapon. The shift was subtle, almost merciful. Human ships did not surge forward in rage or triumph. They adjusted vectors, tightened spacing, and began moving with deliberate intent. The coalition fleet, already disoriented, sensed the change immediately. This was no longer observation or testing. This was resolution. Human fire patterns altered first. Instead of probing strikes, coordinated pulses rippled through space, each impact precisely timed. Coalition vessels lost power in waves, not from overload, but from deliberate interruption. Energy grids collapsed without exploding. Engines shut down without catastrophic failure. Ships drifted intact, crews alive, systems silent. Panic erupted as captains realized they were being dismantled rather than destroyed. Attempts to regroup failed instantly. Command signals vanished into static. Navigation arrays returned false vectors. Fleets trained for domination found themselves blind, deaf, and isolated. Every response triggered another failure, each recovery attempt quietly anticipated. Humanity was no longer learning. It was executing. Escape corridors opened unexpectedly. Human formations parted just enough to allow retreat. Some coalition commanders took the opportunity, ordering emergency withdrawals. Others hesitated, suspecting deception. Both choices ended the same way. Those who fled were tracked but untouched. Those who remained were rendered inert within minutes. The message was unmistakable. Humanity was controlling the outcome, not chasing victory. A transmission finally cut through the chaos. It carried no emotion, no threat, no flourish. The human voice spoke with calm precision, addressing the coalition fleet as a collective rather than an enemy. It explained briefly that this engagement had been avoidable. That warnings were not challenges. That human ships were built with assumptions forged through centuries of conflict where failure meant extinction. The message continued unhurried. Human vessels were designed to operate independently because command structures always failed first. They carried redundant systems because supply lines never held. They prioritized survival because wars were never short. Humanity did not seek conquest. It sought certainty. And certainty required preparation far beyond what the galaxy considered reasonable. As the transmission ended, another series of strikes disabled the last remaining offensive platforms. Weapons went dark across the coalition fleet. Silence spread, broken only by drifting hulls and stunned crews. No cheers followed. No pursuit. Human ships held position, engines steady, weapons idle. Coalition leadership, scattered and powerless, finally issued the unthinkable order. A ceasefire request. It was transmitted on every frequency, stripped of protocol, stripped of pride. It acknowledged failure without naming it. It asked for terms without leverage. Humanity responded immediately. Ceasefire accepted. Conditions followed, concise and non-negotiable. Human space would be recognized as sovereign. No future incursions would be tolerated. Diplomatic channels would be respected. Any violation would be met with identical restraint, followed by identical consequences. There were no demands for territory. No reparations. No submission. That, more than the battle itself, terrified the coalition. Human ships slowly powered down their weapons. Formations loosened. Some vessels began assisting disabled coalition ships, restoring life support and stabilizing reactors. The act was neither kindness nor mockery. It was consistency. Humanity had proven its point. Further suffering served no purpose. As the fleets disengaged, one truth settled across the galaxy. The humans had not revealed their full strength. They had revealed their discipline. Their ships were not instruments of domination, but of control. They did not conquer space. They defined boundaries and enforced them with absolute clarity. The warning, once dismissed, now echoed everywhere. Human ships were special. And the galaxy would remember why. The aftermath unfolded quietly, which unsettled the galaxy more than destruction ever could. No worlds burned. No borders shifted. No fleets vanished into debris fields. Yet everything had changed. Records of the engagement spread through every major power, analyzed frame by frame, stripped of assumption. The conclusion was unanimous and deeply uncomfortable. Humanity had rewritten the rules without demanding the right to do so. Coalition leadership fractured almost immediately. Admirals blamed doctrine. Strategists blamed arrogance. Politicians blamed each other. None could explain how a force so measured had dismantled centuries of dominance without seeking control. The humiliation was not the loss of ships, but the loss of certainty. For the first time, the coalition no longer knew how war was supposed to end. Across neutral systems, military planners studied human ship schematics obtained through fragmented intelligence. They failed to replicate the design philosophy. Redundancy on redundancy seemed wasteful. Systems built to survive catastrophic failure appeared inefficient. No one could justify constructing vessels that assumed command collapse, isolation, and prolonged attrition as defaults. Except humanity already had. And it worked. Alien historians trace the pattern backward. Humanity's past was not defined by unity, but by constant internal struggle. They had fought themselves, their environment, scarcity, and extinction-level threats long before reaching the stars. Survival had never been guaranteed. Victory had always been temporary. Their ships reflected that worldview with brutal clarity. The phrase spread slowly at first, then everywhere. Human ships are special. It became a warning pass between fleets, whispered in war councils, embedded into revised engagement protocols. Not as myth, but as policy. Human space was reclassified. Not hostile. Not friendly. Untouchable. Humanity made no attempt to capitalize on fear. Trade resumed. Diplomacy continued. Their fleets withdrew to patrol routes no larger than before. There were no victory parades. No grand declarations. The restraint unsettled observers more than conquest ever could. Species that ruled through force could not understand power without expansion. Humanity had demonstrated power through refusal. In private channels, alien diplomats asked why humanity had not pursued advantage. The answers were simple. Control invited resistance. Occupation required maintenance. Fear decayed. Boundaries, once enforced, lasted longer. The coalition officially amended its charter months later. Expansion without consent was removed. Compliance operations were suspended indefinitely. Entire academies rewrote doctrine. The engagement with humanity was taught not as a defeat, but as a lesson in misjudgment. A reminder that strength could exist without spectacle. Among veterans who survived the encounter, the memory lingered differently. They remembered ships that did not panic. Crews that did not celebrate. Weapons that disabled rather than annihilated. They remembered the sensation of fighting something that was not angry, not cruel, not ambitious. Something prepared. In the end, the warning returned to where it had begun, no longer ignored, no longer mocked. Human ships were special because they were built by a species that expected to lose control, to suffer damage, to endure alone, and to continue regardless. They were forged not for dominance, but for survival in a universe that offered none. The galaxy learned that day that humanity did not seek to rule the stars. It sought to outlast them. And that was far more terrifying.